The air at 4,000 meters is thin, freezing, and deadly, a graveyard for the world's most elite military snipers. 13 of them had already arrived, bringing millions of dollars in gear, decades of combat experience, and nerves of steel. Yet, one by one, they all folded. They couldn't hit the target. They couldn't even read the wind. As the generals stood in a heated, frantic room watching the mission collapse, they made a desperate, almost shameful phone call to the one person they had publicly laughed out of the training program weeks earlier. She didn't ask for a better rifle, and she didn't ask for a team. She just looked at the target, closed her eyes, and said, "They missed because they were looking at the mountain, not the breath of the wind." Within 10 minutes, she was standing where 13 legends had failed. But what she did next didn't just break a record, it exposed a secret that the military had been hiding for years. Chapter 1. You are standing on the edge of the jagged ridge, the same spot where the previous shooter had crumbled just an hour ago. The wind here isn't just a breeze, it's a living, breathing entity that screams between the crevices of the limestone peaks. It shifts every 3 seconds, pulling your scope to the left, then pushing it violently to the right. Below you, the target is a speck, nearly impossible to resolve with the naked eye. This is the Dead Man's Gap, a range so notorious that elite special forces units use it to break the egos of their best candidates. Before you, 13 men who have served in the darkest corners of the world, men decorated with silver and gold, had tried to land a single shot. They had the latest ballistics computers, the most expensive custom-built rifles, and spotters who had been tracking wind patterns for days. And yet, the result was always the same: a miss, sometimes by a few inches, sometimes by a few feet. But a miss is a failure, and in this environment, failure means the mission is compromised. You can feel the weight of their judgment in the air. The commanding officers are watching through long-range lenses, their faces etched with frustration and disbelief. They didn't want you here. You know that. They had dismissed your techniques as unconventional and your math as impossible. They told you that you didn't have the discipline for long-range engagement. You can still hear their voices, muffled by the howling wind, echoing in the back of your mind. They wanted a soldier. They got you. But as you adjust your bipod, you aren't thinking about their skepticism. You are feeling the vibrations of the mountain through the soles of your boots. You notice something none of the other 13 men saw. While they were busy fiddling with their gadgets, trying to force the technology to give them an answer, you were looking at the way the dust settles on the eastern slope. It's a subtle, almost invisible movement, a rhythmic shift that shouldn't be there. You take a slow, deep breath, tasting the metallic tang of high-altitude frost. You don't look at the scope first. You look at the landscape. You see a series of small, natural funnels created by the rock formations, a hidden tunnel of air pressure that dictates exactly how the wind behaves at the target's location. The men before you had been compensating for the wind at the firing position. That was their fatal error. They were fighting the wrong battle. You realize that to hit this shot, you don't need more power. You need to anticipate where the bullet will be pulled 3 seconds after it leaves the barrel. You reach out, your fingers cold, and you start to dial in your elevation. You aren't using the computer's recommendation. You're using a calculation you developed in the silence of your own training, a method that relies on the intuition of the environment rather than the precision of a sensor. The silence on the radio is deafening. The spotters at the command tent are waiting for you to fail, just like the others. They are already drafting the report about how even the outsider couldn't handle the pressure. You pull the rifle into your shoulder, the stock cold against your cheek. You find your breathing pattern matching the rhythm of the mountain itself. 1, 2, 3. The wind dips. This is it. You have a window of exactly 4 seconds before the pressure shifts again. Your finger touches the trigger, not with a squeeze, but with a gentle, patient caress. You aren't just shooting. You're orchestrating a moment of physics that shouldn't be possible. But just as the crosshairs settle over the center of the target, you notice something in the thermal feed that makes your heart stop. Something is moving on the ridge, something that isn't part of the target, and it's closing in on your position fast. The movement on the ridge isn't a shadow, it's a heat signature, small but fast, cutting through the dense brush about 500 yards to your right. In the world of long-range precision, 500 yards is practically point blank, but at this altitude, that's where the real danger lives. Your heart doesn't spike. You've trained it not to. Instead, your focus narrows into a laser-thin line. You realize that your mission isn't just about the shot anymore. It's about survival. You aren't supposed to be here, and whoever or whatever is moving on that ridge clearly doesn't want you here either. You slowly peel your eye away from the scope, keeping your body perfectly still against the frozen rock. The wind is screaming again, masking the sound of footsteps, but you can feel the rhythmic crunch of gravel through your boots. Someone is hunting the hunter. You look back at the target one last time, your finger hovering inches away from the trigger. The temptation to fire is overwhelming. If you take the shot, you prove every single one of those generals wrong. You validate your entire career in a single, thunderous second. But if you fire, you give away your exact location to the intruder. The decision hangs in the air, heavier than the cold itself. You calculate the trajectory again, your mind racing through the variables, the temperature drop, the barometric pressure, and now the unknown variable of an adversary closing in. You slowly slide your hand toward your secondary sidearm, eyes scanning the jagged horizon. The thermal feed on your wrist flickers and the signature vanishes. It didn't retreat, it went prone. It's waiting. They are waiting for you to commit to the shot. You realize with a sickening jolt that this wasn't just a test of marksmanship, it was a setup. The 13 snipers who came before you didn't just fail, they were watched, neutralized, and potentially replaced. The silence from the radio, which you thought was just the generals waiting for a result, is now clearly intentional. They aren't talking to you because they aren't listening to you anymore. They're waiting to see who claims the kill and who dies in the process. You shift your weight, feeling the bite of the ice beneath your tactical vest. You need a distraction, something to force the intruder to reveal their position without sacrificing your own. You reach into your pack, your movements slow and deliberate, and pull out a small, high-density chemical flare. It's not for signaling, it's for thermals. You slide it down the slope toward the center of the ravine. If the person watching you is as professional as they seem, they will react to the sudden heat signature. You wait, your pulse steady, your rifle still pointed at the original target, your left hand ready to ignite the flare. 3 seconds pass. The wind gusts, rattling your gear. You hold your breath, your muscles locked in a static state of peak tension. Suddenly, from the rocks to your right, you see it, a flash of movement, a silhouette rising just an inch too high. It's a marksman, dressed in gear that blends perfectly into the limestone. They aren't military. The tech they're using is civilian, but it's modified, deadly. They're aiming exactly where they expect you to be, but they haven't accounted for the shift in your position. You have that one split second of advantage. You have to decide, do you take the shot on the long-range target, or do you turn and neutralize the threat that is currently lining up a crosshair on your head? You realize the target at 4,000 meters isn't just a dummy, it's a decoy, and the moment you pull that trigger, you are stepping into a trap that has claimed the lives of everyone who came before you. The realization hits you harder than the recoil of a .50 caliber round. The decoy at 4,000 meters is pulsing, a low-frequency electronic hum that you finally recognize as an active beacon. It's not just a target. It's a lure designed to broadcast the precise location of any shooter foolish enough to range it. The 13 snipers before you didn't just fail to hit the mark, they were tagged, tracked, and then systematically silenced the moment they dialed in their scope. You feel the hair on your arms stand up. You aren't just being hunted, you are being harvested. The shadow to your right, the marksman, shifts again. You can see the glint of their optic reflecting the dim, dying sun. They aren't firing because they want to see what you do next. They want to see if you're smart enough to realize the game is rigged. You keep your breathing slow, shallow, and controlled. You know that if you move even an inch, the thermal sensors they've likely placed around the perimeter will pick up the heat of your body against the cold rock. You are currently trapped in a perfect kill zone, and the only way out is to flip the script. You reach into your vest, your fingers moving with surgical precision to bypass the internal comms, cutting the connection to the base station entirely. As soon as your radio goes dark, the tactical environment changes. You hear a sharp, static-filled burst from the enemy's side, a command being given. They know you've gone dark. They know you've figured it out. Suddenly, the silence of the mountain is broken by the unmistakable sound of a suppressor-equipped bolt cycling. They aren't waiting anymore. You have seconds. You don't look toward the target. You don't look toward the threat. Instead, you dump your magazine, not into the enemy, but into the structural rock face directly above your position. The impact creates a localized avalanche, a roar of cascading stone and ice that surges between you and the marksman. It's a chaotic, blinding wall of debris. Under the cover of that man-made storm, you scramble backwards, sliding down the slope toward a narrow, hidden drainage tunnel you spotted on the topographical map 3 days ago, the map that the generals told you was obsolete. As you plummet down the embankment, stone and dirt tearing at your clothing, you hear the sharp thwack of bullets striking the rock exactly where your head was seconds ago. They are relentless. You land in the freezing slush of the drainage tunnel, the darkness swallowing you whole. You are breathing hard now, the exertion finally catching up to you. You reach into your kit and pull out the one item you refuse to leave behind, a portable high-frequency jammer. It's illegal, it's unauthorized, and it's the only thing that can disable the beacon on the target. You activate it, and for a moment, the world goes quiet. No hum, no heat sensors, no communication. You are in the belly of the mountain, alone, wounded, and outgunned. But as you look up through a crack in the tunnel ceiling, you see the marksmen standing on the ledge you just vacated, their weapon raised. They are looking for a body. They aren't looking for a counterattack. You slowly pull your backup sidearm, check the chamber, and realize that by going off the grid, you've become the only person on this mountain they can't track. But as you prepare to move, your earpiece, which you thought was disconnected, suddenly crackles to life with a voice that isn't supposed to exist. It's the voice of the first sniper who went missing, and he's whispering a warning that makes your blood run cold. "Don't come up. There's a second shooter behind you." The whisper in your ear is gravelly, strained, and unmistakably human. It's the voice of Sergeant Elias, the legend who vanished on this very range 6 months ago. The transmission is jagged, cutting in and out, but the warning sends a jolt of pure adrenaline through your system. You are not just being hunted by a marksman on the ridge, you are being stalked from within your own blind spot. You press your back against the damp stone of the tunnel, your heart hammering against your ribs, and your eyes scan the darkness. You don't need to see the second shooter to know they are close. You can hear the distinct, metallic click of a safety being disengaged, the sound of a predator moving in for the final kill. You realize the game is far more sinister than a simple test of skill. This is a culling. They are using this training environment as a live-fire laboratory to eliminate anyone who possesses the intuition to solve the puzzle, anyone who can see through the military's manufactured propaganda. You slowly pull your knife from your sheath, your grip white-knuckled. If they are in the tunnel with you, they are within arm's reach. The air in the narrow passage is heavy with the scent of ozone and stale, frozen earth. You hold your breath, forcing your body into a state of absolute stillness, turning yourself into a ghost in the dark. Then you hear it. A soft, rhythmic scrape of tactical boots against gravel, barely a few feet behind you. They aren't rushing, they are confident. They think you are still scrambled, panicked, and searching for an exit. You shift your weight, carefully planting your boots to avoid a single sound. You need to turn this enclosed space into a trap. You reach into your tactical vest and pull out a high-intensity strobe light, a piece of gear usually meant for signaling rescue, but here it's a flashbang for the senses. You wait for the exact moment the footsteps pause, the moment the shooter's focus intensifies on the shadows you've left behind. You strike. You slam the strobe against the tunnel wall, the light exploding with such blinding, erratic intensity that it turns the pitch-black tunnel into a strobe-lit nightmare. The shooter screams, a visceral sound of confusion and blinding pain. You don't hesitate. You launch yourself from the shadows, a blur of motion in the strobing light. You slam into the intruder, the force of the collision echoing through the tunnel like a gunshot. You grapple, the space too tight for weapons, forcing a brutal hand-to-hand fight for survival. You can feel the heavy ceramic plates of their armor against your chest, the desperation in their movements. This isn't a soldier you're fighting, it's a specialist. As you fight, you manage to rip the mask from their face. The light flashes again, illuminating a face that is not only familiar, but identical to the photo of the shooter you saw in the briefing files this morning. It's a ghost from the roster of discharged personnel. They are looking at you with eyes devoid of humanity, cold and mechanical. As you pin them against the wall, they let out a hollow, terrifying laugh. You think you're the first to survive the tunnel? They rasp, their voice echoing in the small space. The real test wasn't the shot. The test was whether you'd survive your own side. Before you can react, they pull a small, pinless grenade from their vest, a proximity detonator. Your eyes widen. It isn't set to explode on impact, it's linked to their own heartbeat. As long as they are alive, the bomb is disarmed. The moment their heart stops, the tunnel becomes a grave. You are literally holding the trigger of your own executioner. The seconds tick by, the strobe light begins to fade, and you realize you have mere moments to find a way out of a trap that has been perfectly engineered to ensure that if you win, you still lose. The weight of the device in the intruder's hand feels like lead, a heavy, pulsating reminder that your survival is inextricably linked to the person trying to kill you. The proximity detonator isn't just a threat, it's a masterclass in psychological warfare. If you neutralize your attacker, you trigger a chain reaction that will collapse this entire tunnel system and bury you under tons of granite. The shooter knows this, and that twisted, hollow grin on their face proves they have zero intention of leaving this tunnel alive. They are a suicide asset, a pawn in a game played by people who view lives as disposable variables. You realize you have to shift the battlefield. You can't kill them, and you can't let them stay active. You quickly tighten your grip, slamming their arm against the tunnel wall with enough force to stun them, but not enough to stop their heart. You jam your knee into their chest, pinning them while your mind races. You need a way to neutralize the signal without triggering the sensor. You think back to the electromagnetic pulses you felt earlier, the beacon. If you can force a feedback loop, you might be able to fry the detonator's receiver before the proximity sensor registers the loss of a heartbeat. You rip the high-frequency jammer from your pack, your hands shaking with the sheer intensity of the effort. You don't have time for a perfect setup. You press the device directly against the grenade's housing. You want to play games? You growl, your voice low and dangerous. Let's see how your gear handles a surge. You crank the jammer to its maximum output. The air begins to hum, a high-pitched, ozone-heavy whine that vibrates in your teeth. The shooter's eyes widen in genuine terror as the light on the detonator begins to flicker, turning from a steady, threatening red to an erratic, dying amber. The tunnel erupts in a surge of blue static. The jammer is working, but it's overloading. The heat coming off the device is searing your palms, and the smell of melting circuitry fills the narrow space. The intruder struggles, trying to pull the grenade away, but you hold them fast, your determination overriding the pain. The amber light pulses faster. Then, with a sharp pop, the device goes completely dark. It's dead. The detonator is fried. The shooter goes limp, their confidence shattered, but you don't let up. You deliver a final, calculated strike, knocking them unconscious before they can reach for a secondary weapon. You slump back against the tunnel wall, gasping for air, the silence that returns to the tunnel feeling heavy and unnatural. You are alive, but the victory is short-lived. Through the crack in the ceiling above, you hear the distant, rhythmic thrum of a drone. Not a military observation bird, but a high-altitude hunter-killer. They've locked onto your position because of the massive electromagnetic spike you just generated. You scramble to your feet, abandoning your gear, and dive deeper into the darkness of the tunnel. You realize the mountain isn't just a range, it's a massive, hidden facility, a subterranean network that spans the entire ridge. As you run, the walls shift, revealing glass panels and reinforced steel doors that clearly don't belong in a training zone. You find a heavy blast door slightly ajar, and as you squeeze through, you aren't greeted by more tunnel. You are greeted by a view that stops you dead in your tracks. You are standing on a catwalk overlooking a massive underground command center filled with rows of screens, each displaying the footage of the 13 snipers who failed, their final moments caught from angles that shouldn't exist. And right in the center, on the main monitor, is a live feed of your own position with a timer counting down from 60 seconds. They aren't waiting for you to finish the mission. They are finishing you. The screen is a brutal mirror, displaying your own terrified face reflected back at you from the main monitor. You are the final variable in their equation, and the countdown, 55 seconds, is the executioner's watch. The command center is a sterile, hum-filled cavern that reeks of high-end server cooling and cold, calculated malice. You are standing on a glass-bottomed catwalk, looking down at the architects of this nightmare, men in civilian suits, drinking coffee while they watch the lives of elite soldiers get extinguished like candle flames. They haven't even looked up yet. To them, you are just another data point, a flicker on a screen that is about to go dark. You don't have time to be a soldier anymore. You have to be a ghost. You don't aim for the guards. You aim for the architecture. You spot the cooling array for the main server farm, a massive liquid nitrogen-cooled tower that, if ruptured, would flash freeze every piece of data in this room. You pull your sidearm, but instead of firing at the personnel, you fire a single deafening round into the primary pressure valve above the tower. The sound is an absolute roar in the enclosed space. The metal screams, a white-hot jet of pressurized gas explodes outward, and the room is instantly engulfed in a blinding sub-zero blizzard. Panic erupts in the command center. The men in suits scramble, slipping on the suddenly frosted floor, their screams drowned out by the hiss of the escaping gas. The screens flicker and die one by one as the temperature shock fries the server architecture. The countdown on the main monitor hits 0, but instead of a bomb, the entire facility plunges into total, absolute darkness. You are moving in the chaos, a shadow among shadows, closing the distance to the control console. You don't need a weapon. You have the truth. You yank a physical drive from the main terminal, the evidence of every single failed sniper, the recordings of their last moments, and the signatures of the people who ordered the hits. You find the emergency exit, a heavy manual bulkhead door that the automated systems can't lock. You throw your shoulder into it, the freezing air from outside hitting you like a physical wall as you burst back into the open, snowy night. You don't look back. You run until your lungs burn, until the mountain is just a silhouette against the moon. You disappear into the wilderness, not as a casualty, but as the only person who knows what really happens at 4,000 meters. The military will call you a deserter. They will try to erase your existence, just like they did to the others. But you have the drive, and tomorrow, the world is going to see exactly what those 13 snipers were really fighting against. You've stood in the gap where legends fell, and you've looked into the eyes of the machine that tried to break you. But now it's your turn to hold the crosshairs. If you found yourself caught in a game where the rules are designed to kill you, would you fight to stay silent, or would you take the shot that changes everything? This isn't just about one woman on a mountain, it's about the truth hidden in the shadows of the people we trust the most. If you felt that same fire, if you believe that the truth is worth the fight, then hit that like button to pull the trigger on this story. Subscribe and turn on the notifications because there are more secrets buried in these peaks than one video can hold. Drop a comment below. What would you have done when the countdown started? Let's keep this conversation alive. We're just getting started.